in a world overrun by zombies. They were drinking and playing the piano, causing Madison and Victor to find themselves in this predicament. They can only fight to kill the zombies that come in. Madison accidentally found a small warehouse inside, but the door couldn't be opened. After Madison kills one of the zombies, she has a plan. Madison calls Victor in, faced with a desperate situation. They have to try Nick's solution. Sure enough, the zombies stop going crazy and treat them as one of them. When they got out, they blocked the door to the lobby. Then they get to the front of the hotel and realize the car is gone. There was no time to think. Madison and Victor scaled the hotel's second floor. Madison was deeply concerned about Alicia's safety and had a strong belief she wouldn't leave. Victor tried to console Madison, suggesting Alicia and Ophelia might have been forced to retreat and left in a vehicle. However, reality differed. Alicia and Ophelia were actually scavenging supplies within the hotel. As Alicia emerged from her shower, she noticed Ophelia was missing. Soon after, Alicia witnessed a horrifying sight. Zombies were plummeting from upstairs incessantly. Their destination was the ground floor where her mother was. Alicia rushed to find Ophelia and descended, only to discover the hallway infested with zombies. At night, Alicia is trapped in her room, marking the number of zombies passing by on the door. Alicia then tidies up and prepares to go downstairs. She moved through the corridor without alerting any zombies, still calling for Ophelia. Unbeknownst to her, Ophelia had already driven away. Zombies were also at the other end of the corridor. Alicia forcibly pried open the elevator doors. Seeing zombies approaching, Alicia disregarded everything else and clung to the rope. Fortunately, the zombies couldn't reach her, but Alicia was losing strength. At that moment, a stranger, a woman, grabbed Alicia. As soon as she came out, the woman held Alicia down and asked if she was sent by the others. In the room, Alicia discovered the woman's name was Elena, the former manager of the hotel. Elena possessed keys to all the hotel rooms. Turns out there were a dozen other tenants in the hotel. One group had taken Elena's nephew hostage, demanding her keys. Alicia explained they had just arrived and she needed to go downstairs to rescue her mother. Elena decided to help Alicia. The next day, the two devised a plan. Alicia attracted the zombies in the hallway and then drew them into a room. It was evident Alicia was no longer the fragile girl she once was. Once the zombies are inside, Alicia closes the glass door, and Elena closes the door from the outside. Cracks are starting to appear in the glass. Fortunately, Elena tossed a curtain over, allowing Alicia to crawl over safely. If Alicia knew what Elena had done before, she wouldn't have trusted her so readily. In the early stages of the virus outbreak, a wedding was taking place in the hotel. The bride's father turned into a zombie. Without hesitation, Elena and her nephew locked the venue's doors, trapping everyone inside. Alicia and Elena reached the first floor, observing the zombies behind the door. Convinced that her mother was still inside, Alicia tried to open the door to find her. Alicia ignores Elena's warnings. Just then, a few people appeared behind Alicia and Elena. They were fellow tenants of the hotel. They wanted Elena's key to the hotel. Elena had no choice but to give them the key in exchange for her nephew Hector. In an instant, Alicia pulled Elena behind the door. Zombies surged out like a tide, forcing them to retreat. Elena led Alicia to an underground passage that led back to the hotel. The zombies followed closely behind. However, upon reaching the entrance of the passage, they couldn't open the door that used to be easily accessible. Someone was surely inside. Alicia desperately pounded on the door, while Elena and Hector fended off the zombies. As the zombies closed in, the door finally swung open. Once everyone was out, Victor used a cabinet to block the exit. After a brief adjustment, supplies were scarce. Hotel resources were under the control of Oscar, the one who took the keys. Madison and Victor decided to speak with Oscar. Inside, Madison made her intentions clear and told the men that they were from the outside. It's a much worse world out there. They can only survive together if they unite to build the hotel as a home. The first order of business was to clear the entire hotel of zombies. The woman expressed that she would never forgive Elena. In truth, her husband was the first to mutate, and her husband bit their daughter, yet she placed the blame squarely on Elena. Madison continued, saying that if they didn't unite, there would surely be another group that would find their way here, perhaps a gang of marauding raiders. Oscar too realized the gravity of the situation. Madison obtained the keys. They were willing to follow Madison's lead. The days ahead consisted of systematically killing zombies, room by room, then gathering them together for incineration. Other survivors in the hotel also stepped up willingly to join. However, the workload was immense. They hadn't even cleared 1/10 of the zombies, and finishing the task would take weeks. Just then, Alicia stumbled upon a solution. A sign indicated swift-flowing water. They could lure the zombies to the swift-flowing water via a high bridge and then guide them into the sea to be washed away. They wasted no time. Madison took on the task of attracting the zombies. She instructed Alicia to wait with a boat out at sea. She didn't trust anyone else. Alicia and Hector started making various noises to attract the zombies on the first floor. Victor and Elena opened the doors of each room to lure out the zombies inside. Madison also attracted zombies from a different direction. When all three parties meet at the bridge, the others quickly moved to the bridge. Madison struck a plate to make noise and attract zombies. Once all the zombies were on the bridge, they closed the gate behind them. Alicia's group moved through a side door to the lower level and then swiftly sailed out to sea to pick up Madison. However, due to the rough waves, the boat could only barely stay afloat in the sea. Madison calmly struck the plate in her hand. Her goal was to draw the zombies into the sea. Alicia is already down there waiting for Madison. When the time was right, Madison leaped. The zombies behind her followed suit, jumping into the sea. They did all this just to build a post-apocalyptic survival base based on this hotel. Under Madison's leadership, they began fortifying the hotel's entrance and planting fruits and vegetables for self-sufficiency. The 2-hour power supply each week was indispensable. The ocean became another asset for their survival, providing them with fresh fish every day. Just when everyone thought things were heading in a positive direction, the doorbell rang and Victor just opened the door.
You took my daughter from me. You took her.
It turned out the woman's daughter had turned into a zombie and was hiding in the room. Victor took care of the zombie with Oscar's permission. Kneeling on the ground, Victor called out to Madison in despair. Thankfully, Oscar brought in a medical intern named Andres to help. After examining Victor and ensuring no vital organs were harmed, they now needed antibiotics and alcohol. Elena had an idea of a place where they could trade for supplies. The woman who had wounded Victor, Eileen, had become the most dangerous figure in the hotel. No one knew when Eileen might strike again. As the leader, Madison proposed the suggestion to exile or indefinitely detain Eileen. Everyone agreed to this proposition. Then Elena, Madison, and Oscar headed to the warehouse to exchange drugs. Meanwhile, in Nick's community, they faced significant challenges. Just after Nick and Luciano woke up, they heard that a family of 3 had escaped the community. They were well aware that the community was now facing a water shortage. While they could trade medicine and supplies, it would only last for about half a year. Little did they know, the family of 3 who escaped the community had been captured by Marco, the leader of the supermarket. Marco doesn't want to wait for Nick to exchange drugs again and again and asks the men where the community is. Nick and Alejandro say that they have to plan ahead, but Alejandro keeps his faith and waits for the Lord's salvation. Inside the supermarket, the fish brought by Madison and Elena pleased them, and the man warned them not to wander. However, shouting soon echoed through the supermarket. It was Marco asking about the location of the community from the man, but the man claimed Nick would come with medicine to exchange for supplies. With Elena translating, Madison realized it could possibly be her son Nick, and she couldn't control her emotions any longer. Heading inside, on someone else's turf, this was a grave disrespect. Madison anxiously asks if their name is Nick. Marco was furious, and before Madison could even finish her question, Marco's men took her away. On that day, Nick was taking a stroll when he suddenly felt something was off. 2 figures were observing him from a distance. Marco still managed to discover the address of their community. Back at the hotel, Madison and the others handed over the medical supplies to Andres. Alicia was in conversation with Elena. Suddenly, the hospital's power was restored, and the indicator lights came on. Alicia quickly ran to the rooftop and urged her mother to turn off the lights, as it would make them visible to everyone. In this post-apocalyptic world, it was equivalent to revealing their position. However, Madison adamantly refused to turn them off. She believed her son Nick was not far away and this would help him find them. A man in the distance also spotted the hotel's lights. But who was he? Early in the morning, the entrance to the hotel was filled with countless survivors, because last night, in her desperate search for her son Nick, Madison had disregarded warnings and turned on the community's power. The consequence was that all the nearby survivors flocked to the hotel. Seeking refuge, Madison finally realized how foolish her actions were, and her apologies seemed feeble. In the quest for survival, everyone was selfish. Just then, a figure appeared at the door, muttering incessantly. After a month had passed, Madison and Travis were finally reunited. Madison asked the others to open the door. Oscar and the rest struggled but eventually opened the door slightly, carefully and cautiously. They allowed Travis to enter alone. Madison and Travis hadn't seen each other for a long time and missed each other deeply. After a conversation, they learned that Chris had met 3 young people and felt like he had found kindred spirits. Not only did he kill the rancher, but he also cooperated with the other 2 young people to kill their injured teammate, just because their injured mate would have slowed them down in their quest. Chris eventually abandoned his father and joined the 2 young people, and Travis saw the hotel sign and came here. Due to the overwhelming number of newcomers, Oscar had no choice but to shelter them in the basement. A total of 43 people had entered, but the hotel couldn't afford to feed half of them, and they were a mixed bag, some with unknown injuries. A plan had to be devised, but did you think it ended there? At night, another group arrived, standing at the front gate and calling out. The next day, inside the basement, the 2 young men showed no gratitude and kept complaining. After some inquiries, Madison learned that one of them had dislocated their arm due to a car accident, and they were also complaining about the driver's incompetence. Sensitive Madison immediately realized they must be the ones who traveled with Chris. They said Chris was dead. Madison was unsure what to do and sought out Victor. Victor, however, advises that Travis should never know about this, or he'll have no hope of surviving in the post-apocalyptic world. They then decided to send the 2 young men away. Madison told them she would take them to a separate room for arm treatment, but then everyone in the basement started protesting about how they could stay in the room, and so the group began to protest behind Madison. Travis, who was in the room, heard the ruckus outside and saw the 2 young men who were being kicked out. Travis then rushed to stop Madison, and they took the 2 young men to a room. Travis struggled to control his emotions and had the doctor treat Brandon's arm. Brandon says they'll tell what happened to Travis' son, but they have to give them a car and supplies. Despite objections from those behind her, Madison reluctantly agreed. Brandon said they hadn't been away from the farm for long. They were exhausted from driving, and Chris volunteered to take the wheel, but unexpectedly, they ended up getting into a car accident. The car rolled over for a few weeks and Chris was thrown through the windscreen and died instantly. Travis found it hard to accept and was about to leave, but he then asked where they had left Chris. One of Brandon's companions quickly said they had dragged Chris out of the car and buried him under a tree. Travis immediately sensed something was amiss. Recalling how these 2 had treated their injured comrade before, Travis closed the door and locked it. He was ready to use force to extract the truth. Despite his seemingly mild demeanor, Travis was exceptionally strong, and taking on 2 people was no challenge. Faced with the threat of overwhelming force, Brandon eventually spilled the truth. After the car accident, Chris was still alive but had suffered a severe leg fracture. These 2 then shot and killed him. As a father, realizing his son had been gunned down by these 2 sent Travis into a frenzy. Travis went crazy and beat them up.
You got to stop, please!
But Travis had already gone into a frenzy, paying no heed to anyone. Oscar got hit by Travis. 2. Travis unleashed his rage, mercilessly beating the 2 until they were dead. At this moment, it seemed like Travis had lost the entire world. Finally, others managed to break a window and open the door. Oscar was also seriously injured and in dire condition. Madison's immediate concern was to comfort her husband. Shortly after, Elena brought members of the community to take Travis away. They couldn't allow a murderer to stay. Madison's actions had caused the community to lose trust in her. Fear the Walking Dead, Season 2, was nearing its conclusion. Among millions of viewers, the most common criticism was that Travis and his family always seemed to bring trouble wherever they went. Upon learning of his son Chris's death, Travis killed the 2 perpetrators in a fit of rage. Any father would likely have done the same, or even more violently. However, the unluckiest of them all is Oscar, but this family was quite extraordinary. After the incident, Travis appeared helpless, while Madison played the role of a caring wife, deeply concerned for her husband. They had no guilt whatsoever regarding the uncertain fate of Oscar's life and death. At this moment, Andres was examining Oscar. Oscar's brain was hemorrhaging, and immediate surgery was necessary. The only tool available was a paper cutter. Life and death were now left to fate. The surgery went into the night, and by then, it was clear that Oscar's condition was beyond saving. Andres, Hector, and Elena remained by his side, infuriated by the fact that the culprits were sleeping soundly in their room. Lying on the couch, Travis was still thinking about his son. Suddenly, Hector kicked open Madison's door and delivered a brutal blow to Travis. Madison tried to intervene, assuring them that they would leave together with Travis. Hector is drowning in grief over the loss of his best friend and he's frantically venting his anger. Andres aimed his gun at Travis, accusing him of killing but sleeping soundly here. As Andres prepared to fire, Alicia plunged a knife into his chest. Andres collapsed, escalating the conflict further. Hector shoved Alicia against the wall, and Travis stepped in to protect her. Victor arrived with a gun, managing to defuse the situation. Hector and his group rushed out to call for backup, leaving Madison to realize they needed to escape. Andres was left unattended on the ground. The family arrives at the car. Victor, on the other hand, says he doesn't want to go any further and is prepared to stay. And he probably knows he'll die sooner or later with a family like this. Travis wasted no time and smashed through the hotel's gate with the car. Their next destination, the supermarket. In search of clues about Nick, this community uses a zombie horde as a protective shield and must be accessed through trucks in the zombie horde. But the boss of the supermarket, Marco, finds out. Nick and Alejandro knew they needed to act quickly. Marco would likely attack the community. Alejandro, however, was a devout believer who had faith that God would save them. The next morning, Nick and his companion didn't alert Alejandro as they quietly took medicines from a cabinet. They headed to the supermarket to negotiate with Marco. Inside the supermarket, they were surprised to find unfamiliar faces. Marco was in discussion with another faction's leader, planning an attack on the community. Nick offered medicines for a peaceful exchange, hoping Marco would spare them, but Marco didn't take it. He said that this group has all the medicines in the area, and they are also interested in the location of your base. He warned that they should evacuate the area quickly or face a united attack on their community. Upon Nick's return, he discussed the situation with Alejandro and Luciana, hoping to notify everyone to escape. However, Alejandro insisted on staying put. As they debated, a patient on the bed turned into a zombie and lunged at Nick. In an attempt to save Nick, Alejandro was bitten on the arm. Eventually, Nick and the zombie fell from the second floor, resolving the threat. Unfortunately, Alejandro was bitten in the process. These people have been living here since the end of the world, and are basically incapable of escaping and surviving. They were determined to stay. Nick had to take his backpack and go on his way alone. When Nick got to the street, he was surprised to see a rescue helicopter at the border and it landed in a refugee camp. Nick eventually returned to the community. Alejandro was now running a high fever, surprised that Nick managed to come back. Nick informed Alejandro of a sanctuary at the border, urging everyone to escape and avoid needless sacrifice. The following day, several vehicles arrived at the community's entrance. Marco, accompanied by his subordinates and armed with heavy weapons, arrived at the community. It was evident that they had figured out the method of entering and exiting the community. They covered each other and managed to enter the truck amidst the zombie horde. They just walked into the neighborhood and found it unusually quiet. When they got to the neighborhood, there was no one there. Thinking that the people must have fled in fear, they celebrated by firing their weapons. At this point, Alejandro climbed into the truck, started the engine and drove off. The zombies began moving toward the community's interior. As Marco and his group heard the commotion, they approached the scene where countless zombies were advancing towards them. They hold them off for a while and then start to retreat. There are too many zombies. Madison and the others followed the clues and came to the neighborhood, only to see zombies all over the place. They told Alicia to hide. Madison and Travis came to the neighborhood. The place had turned into a zombie haven. Even Marco himself had succumbed to the infection and become a zombie. Amidst the chaos, Alicia discovered Alejandro inside a truck. Madison was anxiously searching for her son, Nick. Alejandro finally informed them that Nick had gone to the border, which brought Madison some relief. Nick and Luciana, leading the community members, headed towards the border in hopes of finding safety. However, their optimism was short-lived as they were suddenly attacked by a group of armed assailants. Fear the Walking Dead, Season 2, officially concluded with this series of events. The ultimate fate of Nick and the others remains uncertain. Are these soldiers really pre-apocalyptic soldiers? Will Nick have another chance to reunite with his family?